Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mario Mihalcic. I'm an international student advisor at the Bechtel International Center. And joining me today is Sean. This presentation is meant for students who will be graduating this summer. It's part one of an OPT application review process. I won't be going into the details of the eligibility for OPT or what OPT is. We're just going to jump right into the post optional practical training application itself and go over its different parts. So let me go ahead and share my presentation with you. I would just say, in terms of asking questions, you can feel free to use the Q&A to ask your questions, and then we'll circle back at the end of the presentation to answer those questions. So welcome to part one of our post-completion optional practical training application workshop. Today, we'll be going over some of the resources available to you in order for you to complete your post-OPT application. We'll talk a little bit about the new online filing option versus the paper filing option that USCIS is offering. We'll talk about your post-OPT application timeline as a summer graduate. And then we'll drill down into applying for post-OPT, requesting the post-OPT endorsement, which some of you may have already done. And then we'll review the documents needed for your post-OPT application and drill down into the I-765 itself. So all the information that I'm going to present to you today already exists on our website in text format, and we have some YouTube videos. The YouTube videos are slightly dated in that they reference Access for some things, and we are not using Access anymore. We're using this new Bechtel Connect system, and I'll get into that a little bit further into the presentation. But like I said, everything that I'm going to cover already exists on our website and even more. On that same post-completion OPT webpage on our website, you can find what we call the USCIS checklist. Those are the items that you'll need for your application packet that you're going to be mailing to USCIS. We also have our tips for filling out the I-765, and I just saw a typo, so we'll get that corrected. And then we also have a final review checklist. So for a few years, we would have students come in and ask us to review their application. But as the workload increased, what we found is this final review checklist does just as good a job as we did in helping you review your application before you mail it out to USCIS. So that exists on our website as well. Part two of this presentation is meant for the students who haven't mailed their applications yet. And I'm hoping will happen is that you'll come with your completed application to the second part of this presentation, and we'll review it together before you mail it off. And it'll also be a chance for you to ask any questions that you might still have about your application. And just a note, the Bechtel International Center building is still closed because of the pandemic. If you need assistance and you email us to internationalstudents@stanford.edu, your email will usually get answered in about 4 to 5 business days at the most. And please include your Stanford ID number and your CVIS ID number when you email us so we can look up your CVIS record. We also offer afternoon advising by appointment through Zoom. That's Monday through Thursday from 1 to 4 p.m. And we also have group advising, which is this week is still happening on Thursday and Friday at 9 a.m. Next week it moves to Tuesday and Friday at 10 a.m. The group advising is great because you don't need an appointment. So if you have a general question, let's say about your OPT application that doesn't get answered here, or you have some doubt, that group advising session is a great place to get that question answered more immediately than, let's say, by email. So let's talk a little bit about this new online filing system that USCIS is offering versus paper filing. So the online filing has been around for more than a few months now, but it is still brand new in terms of the cycle for applying for OPT. So we, as advisors at the Bechtel International Center, are currently not advising using the online filing system because we don't know the ins and outs of the problems that may occur for students who file online. So we are saying we said to our spring graduates and now to you summer graduates to hold off on using the online filing. You're still more than welcome to use it if you would like. It pretty much mimics the paper filing, except that you're doing it at your own risk. Again, because we don't know yet from other institutions and other students who have filed online where the problems might be. So we don't want to advise using it without being able to tell you, what to watch out for when filing online. So we do still advise, and this presentation itself focuses on the paper filing method. As summer graduates, your degree conferral date is September 23rd, 2021. Your I-20 program end date, if it isn't already September 23rd, 2021, will be that date. So if your I-20 was supposed to end in, let's say, January of 2022, but you're graduating the summer quarter, it'll get shortened to the September 23rd, 2021 date. Everything involving your post-OPT application revolves around that degree conferral date, September 23rd. So the earliest you could have started the post-OPT application process was yesterday. Yesterday was 100 days prior to your degree conferral date, June 15th. So starting yesterday and moving forward, you can use Bechtel Connect to request the OPT endorsement of your I-20, which you'll need for your application. The earliest that you can mail your application to USCIS will be June 25th. You cannot mail your application any sooner to USCIS than June 25th. That is 90 days before your degree conferral date. So those are the kind of two benchmarks in terms of the OPT application timeline. Now, when you request your OPT endorsement in Bechtel Connect, you have to also request an employment start date. That date for you as summer graduates has to fall sometime between September 24th and November 22nd. So that is the 60-day grace period following the degree conferral date. So you will request a start date from between September 24th and November 22nd. When that start date, or what start date you choose to be your employment start date, is dependent on you. So some students may already have a job offer, and so they want to start working on September 24th. So they will request that start date. Some students may not have a job offer and may not want to use the unemployment days that they're given under OPT, and so they'll put a start date closer to November 22nd. That way, that gives them more time to find a job and to start working. Other students may put a later start date, let's say in October or November, just because they know that they won't be starting to work right away, and they're banking on getting the EAD card so that way they can go and travel before, or have some vacation time before starting to work. So again, what employment start date you request is going to be entirely dependent on you. There are 4 steps to applying for OPT. The first step is to apply to graduate in Access, which many of you probably already done. Then you're going to submit the OPT endorsement request using Bechtel Connect. While you're waiting for us to endorse your I-20, you'll be putting together your application packet using the USCIS checklist. And then once you get the OPT endorsed I-20 from Bechtel and you've put your application together, you'll use the final review checklist that we have on our website or the video to review your application and then mail it off to USCIS. So let's review how to request the post-OPT endorsement using Bechtel Connect. Just going to take a moment to get a sip of water here. To access Bechtel Connect, there's a couple different ways. You can do it through our website, bechtel.stanford.edu, or you can go directly to bechtelconnect.stanford.edu. Under the students category, you'll select employment to get the drop-down menu, and then you'll click on start new request under optional practical training. You will only ever click on start new request when you're starting a new request. If you've clicked on that link, on that function already to start new request and you want to come back to either look at your request or to finish submitting it, then you're going to click on continue existing request. If you click on start new request, what happens is we get multiple submissions, which you can't withdraw, and it makes it harder for us in terms of processing time because we have to go through and figure out which of your applications was the one you actually meant to submit. So again, click on start new request to start your new request. And after you've done that, if you want to go back and finish it or take a look at the status of it, you'll click on continue existing request. You log in using your SUNET ID and password. It'll ask you what term, request 2021, I think will be the only one there. And then this is the actual request overview page. Boxes 1 and 3 are just for you to read over and review. Boxes 2, 4, and 5 with the empty checkboxes are the ones that you have to take action on. In or in section 2, you're just affirming that you've read that information. There are links there for information on pre-OPT and post-OPT. Since you're graduating, obviously you'll be applying for post-OPT. And then in section 4, you're just attesting to the information on that bulleted list. Section 5 is where you're going to be entering your employment information for the endorsement request. And that information is just the start date of employment that you're requesting, the end date, which will be 1 year minus a day from that start date, whether it's full-time or part-time, and it should always be full-time, and whether it's pre or post-completion, and so this will be post-completion. In the student remarks field, you're going to insert the statement employment in the field of whatever your major was or your degree at Stanford. And then you'll hit submit. 5B of that section, it's going to ask you if you're applying for post-OPT, you'll mark yes and hit next. And then even though this says post-OPT employer information, what we need from you here is just proof of your application for graduation. And usually that'll just be a screenshot in Access showing that you submitted the request, or whatever other proof you might have that you've applied to graduate. You upload that. And then once you see those empty boxes checked, you have completed all the sections of the endorsement request, and you hit submit. You'll get the little message that it was submitted, and then you'll also get an email through the Bechtel Connect system the next day, indicating or acknowledging that your request was successfully submitted and being processed. Our processing time for post-OPT endorsement requests is about 5 to 10 business days. All right, so let's take a look at the post-OPT application packet that you'll be putting together for you to be mailed to USCIS. This packet is going to include a cover letter, the Form I-765, which is the actual USCIS application for OPT, a form called a G1145. It's a very basic form with just some contact information for you at the bottom of that form. And that's to receive notification by email. You'll need to include a photocopy of the OPT endorsed I-20. So that OPT endorsed I-20 will come to you by email. You're going to self-print that endorsed I-20, sign the front page. You have to, the first page, you have to remember to sign the first page. And photocopy that and include it with your OPT application. You're also going to include copies of all your previous I-20s, and I'll get into that and what that means in a couple minutes. You're going to include a photocopy of the passport bio page of your passport. And you're also going to include a photocopy of the F1 visa page in your passport. This is also referred to the visa stamp. Your passport has to be valid. The visa can be expired because you are allowed to be in the US on an expired F1 visa. You can apply for OPT on an expired F1 visa as long as you've been maintaining your F1 status. The F1 visa page is also known as a visa stamp. Sometimes students get that confused with an admission stamp in their passport, which is the little circular stamp that CBP puts in your passport with the date that you entered the US. That's not what that's referring to. It's the actual visa page in your passport. You need to print out your current I-94, and you can find it on the I-94 CBP webpage. It has to be from your most recent entry into the US. That I-94 number that's on that printout changes every time you enter the US. So it's important that you, when you print the I-94, that it reflects your most recent entry to the US, because that's the I-94 number that you're going to be using on the photocopies. And I'll explain that in another couple minutes. If you have an EAD card from a previous OPT application, let's say from another degree level, you'll want to photocopy that and include that with your application. And then you're going to include a check or money order for the application fee. And you should always verify on the USCIS I-765 website what is the fee before you make that check or money order. And you don't include the biometrics. It's just the application fee. And then you'll need 2 US-sized passport photos to include with your application. So on our USCIS checklist, we do have a sample cover letter, and this is what it looks like. You're going to include the address that you're mailing your application to, the date, your name, your CVIS ID number, that I-94 number from your most recent entry to the US, that you're applying for full-time, post-completion, post-optional practical training, and what your requested start and end dates are. You also will, so a lot of students have to move out. And so when you're telling USCIS where you want your EAD card or any OPT application materials mailed to you, you have to have a mailing address that's valid for the next 6 months. And so for students who are, let's say, moving out, then they're going to be using a trusted friend or a family member's address to mail out those applications. So the address at the bottom that's highlighted in yellow is the space where you would put where you're asking USCIS to mail your EAD card to. That's not your own current address. Some tips when you're putting your application packet together, you're going to be writing your I-94 number on the top of several copies in your packet. You'll be doing that in black ink. That I-94 number will go on top of your copy of your OPT endorsed I-20. That I-94 number you'll handwrite on the top copy of your previous I-20 section. You're going to write that I-94 number on the photocopy of your passport bio page, the photocopy of your F1 visa page, and also in the memo line of your personal check or money order. You will also write the I-94 number on the back of your 2 passport size photos, but you don't want to do that in ink. You want to do that gently in pencil so it doesn't bleed through to the front of the photo. So on the back of your 2 passport size photos in pencil, you're going to write your name and your I-94 number. All the photocopies you make can be either in black and white or color. It doesn't matter to USCIS. In terms of your previous I-20s, so the rule of thumb is you want to give them photocopies of all your previous I-20s. But generally what that means is any of the I-20s that you have in your possession. So sometimes you might have a few that are missing, let's say from another institution that you attended or from early on in your start at Stanford. That's okay. You're just going to be making photocopies of the I-20s that you have in your possession. However, what USCIS is mostly interested in are the I-20s that have any CPT endorsement or prior OPT endorsement on it. So those you definitely want to have. If you're missing a CPT endorsed I-20, that's when you want to reach out to us and see if we can get you a copy of that CPT endorsed I-20. Or in the unlikelihood of having a prior OPT endorsement through Stanford, and you don't have that I-20, then you can reach out to us and ask for that I-20.
But then, sorry. But since March of last year, we've been issuing a lot of digital I-20. So there's a strong likelihood that if you were issued an I-20 since March of last year, you do have an email copy inside your email of whatever I-20 that like you think you're missing. So if you want to check your email history for that.
Yeah, make sure to look around in general before you request that missing I-20 from us, because it is a lot of work for us to find it and get that copy to you. Always verify the fee payment amount and the mailing address for your application by going to the USCIS I-765 page before mailing it off. Again, you don't have to include the biometrics fee for your OPT application, just the fee itself. I believe it's currently $410. There is the option that USCIS gives you to use a credit card payment. We have never advised students to use a credit card. I've seen a few problems where USCIS will misread the card number, and so they reject the application because of the payment. I've seen students submit credit card information and also a check because they want to make sure that if the credit card doesn't get run, that there's a check as a backup. USCIS will reject those applications because you can only submit one type of payment. So do not use the credit card option when paying your application. Also, the other reason to use a personal check is because you'll be able to see in your bank account when that check gets cashed. And so that will allow you to kind of keep track of the status of the processing of your application. You can request a money order or what's that other thing called? Money order, I'm blanking on the other name. Oh, cashier's check from your bank, but that's like cash. So if you don't have the option of personal check, that's the next best thing. But that you can't see when it gets processed because a money order or a cashier's check is the same as cash. It automatically comes out of your bank account when it gets processed by the bank. All right, so let's drill down into the I-765. So we're going to go through the I-765 page by page. And I've also, in this PowerPoint, pasted in the tips that apply to this section that we're looking at. So to begin with, you'll be either typing into this PDF of the I-765 or printing neatly in it. If you're going to print, you have to use black ink. That's the only color they will accept. In some cases, you might be typing or printing because in the fields that don't apply to you, you're going to be entering N/A. And if you're typing on the PDF, sometimes it won't let you use the slash. So you would have to print out the PDF that you filled out by typing in it, and then you're going to be handwriting in N/A into those fields. You should answer all questions fully and accurately. And again, the fields that don't apply to you, you'll be writing in N/A. If it's a numeric field that doesn't apply to you, you'll type or handwrite none. Now, I have not ever experienced a student's application getting rejected if they missed a field where they didn't put N/A or none. So to my mind, doing this helps USCIS process your application. But again, it's not something that you should be overly anxious about because I've never seen an application. I've had students submit applications where they completed all the fields that don't apply to them with N/A or none. I've had students who didn't enter that information in any of the fields that didn't apply to them, mixed fields, and I've never seen an application get denied because a student did or didn't put N/A or none in a field that didn't apply to them. So part 1, you're going to check 1A, initial permission to accept employment. Part 2, under your full legal name, you'll enter your name as it appears on your I-20 and your passport. So it should match those 2 documents. If you don't have a middle name, I advise students to leave that blank because we don't want USCIS to interpret N/A or none as your middle name. So you'll leave 1C blank if you don't have a middle name. In the other names used category, those you will put N/A if you didn't use another name or a nickname on any official documents. So if you've used a different name, so let's say you entered Stanford and then at some point got married and changed your last name, then you would be using your maiden name or listing that maiden name in this other names used field. If all you ever used was your legal name, then you'll be putting N/A in the other names used field. So in your US mailing address, this is the field where you'll either enter your current mailing address if it will be valid for the next 6 months, or if you're going to be requesting USCIS to mail your EAD card or any other communication from USCIS to a trusted friend or family member, you're going to be entering their address in this section. So in care of name will be your friend's name or your family member's name where the application is being mailed to. If they don't have an apartment, a suite, or a floor, just leave that blank. And then if you are using your own address, because your address where you're living, you'll be living there for the next 6 months, then you'll mark, is your current mailing address the same as your physical address? You would mark yes. If you do that, you won't be able to enter anything in the US physical address section. If you mark no, you're going to enter your US physical address. That's the address you're living in at the moment that you're filling this application out. So it won't be a future address, it won't be a prior address. It'll be the address that you're living in now. Section 8 and 9, or items 8 and 9, you're going to leave blank. And then gender, marital status, have you previously filed I-765? Those are all pretty straightforward. You may have filed previously a Form I-765 if you applied for OPT under a different degree level. If you have a social security number, you'll mark yes. And then in 13A and then in 13B, you'll put in your social security number. If you don't have a social security number, you'll mark no, and then obviously you'll write none in 13B then. In 14, do you want the SSA to issue a social security card? So if you've already have a social security number, you'll mark no. Unless you want to get a duplicate card, but I would not advise using the I-765 for that. You can get that through a social security office. So I would advise you, if you have a social security number, to check no for 14. You can, if you don't have a social security number, you can use the I-765 to apply for a social security number. So in that case, you would mark yes for 14. And then because you marked yes for 14, you would complete sections 15, items 15, 16, and 17. So you have to consent for disclosure, and then you have to enter your parents' names. If you mark no, because those fields don't apply to you, you can handwrite in N/A into those fields for your parents' name, or just leave them blank. And you don't put anything next to the check boxes in 15. For 18A and 18B, it asks for your country or countries of citizenship or nationality. You'll most likely just be using 18A, and 18B, you'll type or handwrite N/A. Place of birth is pretty straightforward. Sometimes students won't have a city or town, but just a state or province where they were born. If one of those fields doesn't apply to you, you would type or handwrite N/A. For the 21A Form I-94 arrival departure record number, again, that number is going to come from the printout of your I-94 record. That has to be, again, your latest entry into the US. That I-94 number changes every time you enter the US. So make sure that the I-94 number that you're entering in 21A is the I-94 number from your most recent entry to the US. Your travel document number, you'll type in none. And then it asks you some passport information. The place of your last arrival into the US, that can, if it was San Francisco, it can be SFO, it can be San Francisco, or there's also another, some other initials that end up getting used for SFO as well. You're probably best off just putting San Francisco. Again, I've never seen a student get rejected for using some variation of SFO San Francisco, or whatever city or airport they entered the US from. Hopefully you all know where to find your CUSID number. For 27, you're going to put your eligibility category. Since you're graduating this summer, you should be applying for post-completion OPT. You'll put in C3B. In the example they give, it would be lowercase c, then the number 3, and then B. It doesn't, and then the uppercase B for the last one. But again, I haven't seen an OPT application get rejected if you're not doing the lower cases and upper cases correct. But you can see their example in 28, the way they did C3C. So lowercase c, the number 3, and then uppercase B. Because you're applying for post-completion OPT, the rest of that page does not apply to you. So you can type or handwrite N/A in the fields of 28A, 28B, 28C, then none in 29, And then those check boxes that say yes or no, you just leave those items alone. These sections, again, don't apply to you. This is page 4 now. Or I'm sorry, the part 2 in the left column doesn't apply to you. So you'll put n/a and then none in 31A. Leave 31B alone. Now we get to the applicant statement. We'll check 1A. I can read and understand English, and I have read and understand every question and instruction on this application and my answer to every question. You'll put your contact information, phone number, email address. And then if you're not, Salvadoran or Guatemalan national eligible for benefits under the ABC settlement agreement, you just don't check that box. Because you don't check 1B or 2, I would leave those fields alone and not put n/a in them. So probably the most important part of this application, the one that gets the most easily messed up, is the signature. When you sign in 7A, you have to make sure that your signature is not touching any lines of the box. And that's because they're going to scan your signature and put it on the EAD card. So if it's touching a line of the box, it's not a clean scan, and they will send your application back to you. So again,
I guess they want to receive a wet ink signature as well.
Yeah, you're signing that. That's a really good point, Sean. You're signing that. You're not using your computer to sign it. You're going to print, when you print it out, you're going to sign it with black ink. I have had students who have submitted the OPT application without signing, and it got rejected. So make sure to sign it. Make sure your signature isn't touching any lines of the box.
I think we believe that they extract that signature, and they scan it, and then they place it on the card,
Yes,
which you later receive. So if it's touching any part of the black line or too close to the black line, that poses a problem for them.
exactly. Part 4 is interpreter information. That's not going to apply to you. In those fields, you're going to most likely handwrite. I don't think you can type n/a into those fields. You're going to handwrite n/a in all of those fields, including the date. Technically, you should write none in the date section. But we always get asked, do I have to put n/a in all those fields? Yes, you're better off doing that. And same for all the sections in part 5. The ones with the check boxes, you just leave alone. You don't have to write n/a next to those items, just in the fields for preparer's family name, given name, all that stuff. n/a, prepare signature, n/a. Now for part 6, additional information, sometimes 1A and 1B and 1C will be automatically pre-populated whether or not you need this section. That's okay. Let me mention this before I forget. If you don't need part 6 because you've never done CPT, never had another CUSID number, never applied for OPT before, you still need to submit part 6 with your I-765. I've had students who have not submitted part 6 because they didn't fill it in, and so why do I need to include it with my I-765? They've had their applications rejected. So even if part 6 doesn't apply to you, you're still going to include it with your application. So 1A, 1B, 1C might be pre-populated. If it's pre-populated and it doesn't apply to you, I would say go ahead and just write n/a in 3D and then sign and date it somewhere. Otherwise, if you've been endorsed for CPT or had a previous OPT or a different CUSID number, then in 3A, under page number, you're going to write 3, part number will be 2, item number will be 27, because the information that you're putting in here relates to the fact that you're applying for post-completion OPT. You're going to enter so let's go over CPT entry first. So if you had an endorsement for CPT, you're going to include your CVIS ID number, whether it was part-time or full-time CPT, the CPT authorization dates, and then the degree level you did the CPT under. And you'll do that for every CPT endorsement.
Should you also mention any H-1B or other form of USCIS work authorization, such as J2 work permit?
No. No. Just F status stuff. If you had a previous CVIS ID number, then you would note previous CVIS ID number and what that CVIS ID number was. If you had prior OPT endorsement, if you had a prior OPT, then you would again include the CVIS ID number that you used under that OPT, whether it was part-time or full-time, that it was OPT, and the dates of authorization and the degree level for that OPT. If all you had was an endorsement for OPT, like I thought I was going to graduate winter quarters, so I requested OPT endorsement, realized I wasn't going to graduate, never mailed an application to USCIS, then you don't have to include that information here in part 6. So if you would only include prior or previous OPT if it involved mailing an application to USCIS. Once you've entered that information, then you will sign and date somewhere on this form in black ink. So that's the I-765. Hopefully for part 2, like I said, which will be on Monday, June 28th, you'll have your application packet together and you can bring it with you to the June 28th section. We'll review it, and then we'll also talk about how to mail your application at that time as well. All right, so let's look at some questions.
Yeah, would you like me to read that for you?
Yeah, let me go ahead and stop sharing this.
No problem. I can read them out for you if you wish.
Yeah, let me just grab some water.
Water. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, go ahead and start with the first question.
No problem. Will the start date we put as a start date affect when we will get the mailed work authorization?
No. So USCIS does not. Let me start with this. The processing of OPT applications by USCIS is not transparent. We have no idea why they process some applications sooner than others or how they process it. It's not transparent, but they will not process your OPT application based on your requested start date. Mostly it's first come, first serve with those applications.
Yeah.
There are websites out there, sorry, Sean, there are websites out there that track the processing of I-765s. I don't know how accurate those are. And sometimes students will say, oh, my friend who submitted it a month after me got their OPT already processed, and what's happening with mine? Who's to say? But their processing time is traditionally 90 days. This quarter it seemed to be a little bit faster. Last year, I'm sorry, this past spring quarter, their processing seemed to be faster. Last year, they were taking 120 days to process these OPT applications.
Yeah. Is it okay if I mail the OPT application on June 23rd and the USCIS actually receives it on June 25th?
No, don't do that. Wait until June 25th. That extra day or two that you might have saved yourself by mailing the application isn't going to do anything to speed up your application. It will cause you worry though. So let's say you mail it on June 23rd and they get it on June 24th. Now all of a sudden you're going to be freaking out for 90 days about whether or not your OPT application is going to get rejected because they got it one day before the 90 days or on the 91st day. So just wait until June 25th to mail in your application.
And just to get back to Mario's point about the lack of transparency, we always have a lot of students who, as a collective, they send in on the same day, it gets delivered on the same day, but then they get approved over the course of maybe a month or two, of a span of a month. So some may get it in 35, 40, 50 days. Other people may still be waiting after 90 days and have no delays at all. It's just that, unfortunately, they were unfortunate. We don't know how to phrase it, but it's very, very disappointing for those students who applied in a timely fashion.
Yeah. But you give yourself the best chance of getting an EAD processed in a timely manner by applying early in that mailing off your application early in that 90-day window.
Okay. So just to clarify, this degree conferral date is applied for PhD students and not the thesis submission date. Is like that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
If you're a PhD student, your program end date will be September 23rd, like it is for all the other degree levels.
And then if you miss that quarter, it'll be probably early January. Usually it's the first Thursday after the next quarter begins, unless it's commencement, which is the second or third Sunday in June. So I will be graduating in both master's and PhD programs this summer. Does it matter which degree I use for my OPT application?
Yes, it should be your highest degree level. It should be the PhD level. And that's because at some point you may apply for an H-1B. You're going to be better off with an I-20 that says OPT at the PhD degree level. And the lawyers will be wondering what the heck happened. And that's not something we can go back and change. So you want to make sure when you get your OPT endorsed I-20 that the degree level is for the PhD level, not the master's degree level.
And I guess to rephrase it for the co-term students, people who are doing undergrad degrees and masters, a master's or higher qualification is seen as like an advanced degree, which gives you better chance of winning the H-1B lottery because there are more, I think 65,000 for master's or higher qualifications. For undergrad level, it's a lot less likely that you'll get the H-1B lottery every year.
Yeah.
So that's why it's always good to aim for the highest one possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but then again, to counteract that, if you're graduating a master's and a PhD, well, an undergrad and a master's, one of the reasons why you don't want to apply based on the master's level is if you intend to do maybe an MBA in the future at that higher. There are some students who do an undergrad degree and they graduate with a master's at the same time, but they may have plans to come back to America to do an MBA or a second master's, maybe a year or 2 or 5 years from now. If you graduate with a master's level I-20 and apply for OPT based on that, then it doesn't matter how much or how little of that OPT you use at that master's degree level, you've used all of it in terms of the USCIS. They will not grant you another 12 months of OPT based on that same degree level. They'll allow you to do a PhD in the future and apply for OPT based on that, but you will be no longer eligible for master's level OPT. So there are some students who have long-term aspiration to become an MBA, and that's good, but good for them. I think we answered that one. Okay. I have received an offer letter from a university starting August 23rd. Is it possible to apply for the pre and post OPT at the same time? Besides, the university is applying for the H-1B visa for me. Is there any conflict if I file for the OPT application as like a backup?
So it doesn't sound like you're a summer graduate. So I don't know what your graduation situation is like. This session is specifically for students who are graduating during the summer. And it also depends on how that question gets answered. It also depends on your degree level. So I would say you want to submit that question to internationalstudents@stanford.edu or come to the group advising session tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to get that question answered.
But hypothetically, if the student was maybe completing all the course requirements, wants to start working on August 23rd with a conferral date of September 25th or whatever, would you suggest that they apply for pre and post at the same time, given that this is mid-June?
Yeah, so yeah, the answer is no, because you would have to be applying for both of those now. And if you submit two applications to USCIS at the same time, one for pre-OPT and one for post-OPT, they will cancel one and process the other. We don't know which one they'll cancel and which one they'll process. So if you're trying to start work before September 23rd, it's now that you would have had to timeline that out much earlier and applied at the start of the 90-day window for that August start date for pre-OPT, but now it's too late and you really don't want two OPT applications with USCIS because again, they'll cancel one and process the other and we don't know which one they'll cancel. So they might process your pre-OPT, cancel the post-OPT, and now you're stuck without post-OPT.
And if they process it only after the period of pre-OPT has actually finished, because it's now 3 months later, you end up with no OPT as well. There's that, because it's just less than it's over 2 months from now until that date.
Yeah, they won't necessarily let you know that one of your OPT applications was processed in a timely manner that would allow you to reapply for post-OPT.
Yeah.
So the short answer is no. If you're graduating this summer, the window to apply for pre and post is closed.
And as for the follow-up question about the H-1B visa with another university, you'd have to talk to their immigration office or their immigration attorney about what they're able and willing to apply for you based on their non-profit status. When they decide that they want to apply for it, maybe based on non-cap exemption, and when they think it might take effect as well, if it's successful. So all those are questions. We do typically hold a few H-1B workshops a year, normally given by external immigration lawyers who specialize in private industry applications. Universities are slightly different, but they will go into that to a certain level as well. That's another type of H-1B. I'm not sure if we're going to have any this quarter because it is summer quarter. We typically don't, but I'm not sure if Mario can weigh in on what likelihood of when we might schedule another one, maybe in October.
Probably the fall quarter, yeah.
Yeah, okay. For the F1 visa photocopy requirement, do we ignore this if we hold a Canadian passport?
Yes, you will include the I-94 because the I-94, when you're, again, it's the most recent entry to the US, but that I-94 will indicate that you were entered in F1 status. Mm-hmm. But you as a Canadian citizen will not have a visa page in your passport or visa stamp.
Yeah. But it's the only difference. You have all the other documents, I-94 information, you have a valid passport, you have all the I-20s hopefully that we've ever issued, including the electronic ones. So it works for you. Yeah. And also in terms of a Canadian applying for OPT, there's no difference at all in the processing time. It just means you have one less page to include as a photocopy. That's the only difference, sadly. Yeah. That's done. Canadian F1 students don't need or receive an F1 stamp. I think it's in question. Do we just omit the visa stamp photocopy? Yes, you do. Yeah. And maybe exclude that from your cover letter, because on our template cover letter, you might want to just scratch it out because it's a general template which you can then personalize your own situation.
Yeah, you would. Yeah, make sure to remove that item from the cover letter.
Yeah, yeah. Also, on the cover letter, the green sections are ones that you personalize for your own benefit. And then normally, if there's anything unique or significant regarding the cover letter, such as you're living at one address, but when the card is produced, you want to have it sent to your PO box or to a friend's address. That's something you want to highlight because that's the most important part of the cover letter, is to highlight anything unique about your application. Similarly, if you ever had OPT in the past at the same degree level or lower degree level, you want to mention it there and then highlight that section because that's relevant. That may mean that you are applying for less than 12 months for OPT this time. It's to prevent errors, we hope, by kind of being forthcoming with, this is my application, and by the way, this is something very unique because you'll have a stack of documents that you'll include, and you won't use a staple. You'll be paper clipping everything together. So, okay, that's good. Do we need to include previous TN authorizations in the USCIS application?
No, you're applying for OPT, and so it's only CPT and a prior OPT that may impact your OPT application. So you do not include work authorizations under other immigration statuses.
Yeah. If I have a dual citizenship, does it matter which country I denote in these documents? Perhaps is it preferable to align and use the one corresponding to the passport denoted in the I-20?
So on the I-765, you have to list all the countries that you're a citizen of in that particular field. But the copy of the passport bio page that you'll include is the one that has the visa page in it. So that's, if you have multiple passports from other countries, the copy of the passport bio page that you'll make is from the passport that has the visa page in it. It should also match the country that your I-20 says you're a citizen of.
Yeah, I was trying to find a copy of an I-20, just have a look at, but it's on page 1 and it's near the top, country of citizenship. That's the I-20 that you should, or that's the passport that you should be making copies of. Click done. On applicant's information, should I add my phone number or the trusted friend, where I will ask the actual card to be mailed at if I plan to be outside of the US for some time? If so, will they call the American phone number, can actually reach my friend?
No, so let me look at the I-765. I don't believe there's a space for phone number, no. And on your cover letter, no, they will not call you. If they have to communicate anything to you, it'll come to you by mail. And also, we don't advise that you be outside the US after degree conferral date until you get the EAD card. And now with the, with all the problems of traveling internationally and getting back into the US, it's doubly not advisable to be traveling international at this point if it's something that you can avoid. But no, you will not, they will not call, USCIS will not call you if there's a problem with your application. They'll send you communication through mail.
So once they receive your application and you've included the optional G1145E, the e-notification form, where you maybe gave them your email, your phone number, or some other contact information, eventually they will hopefully send you an email or text message with the receipt notice. And then from then on, you'll be able to go to a USCIS tracking page, just look maybe once a week or once a month to see if there's any updates. If they're asking for more evidence, they should eventually mention it there as well. They won't mention what evidence they're looking for. All it'll say is, on a certain date, we asked you for more evidence. We sent you a communication by a letter. Please respond in a timely fashion. And therefore you can kind of see if there's any, but more often than not, that information that you see in the tracking system is a bit old and out of date because it's not really that well supported. It's a good idea, just like a lot of things in life, but sadly it's under-resourced. But it can be something that you can just look at from time to time in case there's any updates, but it rarely gets updated, especially in a timely fashion. If we make a mistake and our application is rejected, when will we know it? What is the expected fastest time to fix it?
So that's a great question, actually, because it actually leads to something else. Let me start out with the caveat again. USCIS processing is not transparent. On average, if an application gets rejected, from what I've seen, it's usually about 2 months. Sometimes they get rejected sooner when they're just mailing you the entire thing back, so they haven't processed your fee payment. And sometimes if they are processing it and then they come across something that's a problem, then that takes longer for them to get back to you. Now, if you have to resubmit the OPT application, the best thing to do is to reach out to us and let us know, because your OPT endorsement is only valid for 30 days. So let's say for some reason you didn't sign the I-765, the application gets rejected, and now you need to resubmit it. Your original OPT endorsement has likely expired. So we have to re-endorse your I-20 for OPT before you mail in the application again. So if for some reason your OPT application does get rejected, then please let us know, because it's more than likely that we'll have to re-endorse your I-20 for OPT before you resubmit the application.
And so regarding people traveling and wanting to travel to see their family and friends after their graduation, or once they finish all their commitments to Stanford, in order to file the I-765, you have to be physically within the United States in F1 status. If you've already graduated and they decide to reject your application after your graduation date, if you've stayed in the United States, you still have an F1 status, and you're still here to be able to reapply again or to deal with the issue, the urgent issue, that whatever might present itself. However, if you've graduated, you're now overseas, they reject it after your graduation date, then you have no F1 status, you have no grace period, and you have, even though they may have made a mistake in rejecting the application, you have no opportunity to reapply again, and you forfeit your F1 application, your F1 status, and that's no more OPT application, unfortunately. And that does happen from time to time, unfortunately. People don't think that after 2.5 months, they might reject it for some silly missing signature, but they do, unfortunately. So we do recommend, until you receive the AD card, please stay within the United States in case of some issue that rises, that pops up unexpectedly, and then you have a problem. Or on the other side, it's been approved, you decide to travel without the AD card because it's still being mailed to you, but if it gets lost in the post, now you have approved OPT, you've graduated, you're overseas, and you have no EAD card to use for re-entry. That's a problem as well. So I can kind of kill the mood really, but yeah, so that's done. Until I haven't done. Should we only put CPT information under the current program to Part 6?
Yeah, so the only information in Part 6 that you would put is the CPT information, prior OPT, or if you had a previous CVIS ID number. Those three things is what you would be using Part 6 for.
Yeah. One of the reasons why they're looking for the CPT information is they want to see if you've been approved for 12 months or more of full-time CPT at the current degree level. They don't care about part-time, but they still want to look at the part-time information so they can see for themselves through the evidence that you present in terms of the older I-20s of what degree level the CPT was issued and was it full-time or part-time. That's your, because there can be sometimes be some discrepancies in their system and they're comparing the information. You provide the evidence, they look at their system, and hopefully they'll either tally, or the evidence that you have will actually persuade them that whatever information they have is incorrect and they'll accept what you actually give them. So where can I watch the recorded video and download PowerPoint file for this presentation?
Most likely it'll be on our post-OPT webpage in the next day or two.
Mm-hmm. Can we leave the country while the application is being processed? Is it better if we return before September 23rd?
So Sean already answered that question.
Yeah. There's also
if it's still not clear, you can follow up with another question.
And there's also another complication regarding you may not be able to re-enter at all because of the quarantine or COVID-related matters as well.
Yeah,
and you may intend to return, but it may be cancelled. I think in the beginning you indicated that we need to note some duration during our OPT. Is this true? If yes, shall we ask for the maximum of 2 years after our start date?
No. So post-completion OPT is 1 year, 12 months of work authorization, assuming you didn't do any pre-completion OPT. So when you're requesting your start date of employment, you'll be requesting the start date, and then your end date will be 1 year minus a day from that start date. Post-OPT is not 2 years. It's only 1 year, 12 months.
We also see some students trying to apply for their STEM as well at the same time. You can only apply for your post-OPT first, get that, and when you're within 100 days of the end of your post-OPT, only then can you apply yet again in Bechtel Connect for your 2-year STEM extension. You may have a STEM eligible degree when you graduate and plan to work for an E-Verify employer, but it's too early. They're actually separate applications. So you have to do it in phases. When I filed the OPT application on Bechtel Connect, there seems to be no place for me to fill in the employer information in the post-OPT employment section. May I ask if I could update that information?
No, so that's another good question. So post-OPT does not require employment when you apply for it. It's an umbrella work authorization. And so meaning that it's not employment based. So that information, you'll actually be updating yourself through something called an SEVP portal. You'll get an email from SEVP on or a few days after the employment start date on your EAD card. You'll be entering that employment information then. It's not part of the OPT application. So no, there's no space to list employment information if you already have a job offer.
Okay. I think we've already answered this, but I'm going to cover it because it's so important. I have to leave the country on June 23rd. I was wondering if I could prepare all the documents before and have my friend just mail it in for me on the 25th. Alternatively, can I just mail it on the 23rd and use USPS 3 to 10-day delivery to make sure it gets there after the 25th?
No, no, no to both of those.
Mhm.
So you have to be in the US when you're mailing your post OPT application. You cannot be outside of the US when that application is being mailed to USCIS. Also, there's a chance that USPS could deliver your, well, let me stop it there because your second question also relates to leaving the US. You have to be in the US at the time that you're mailing the application to USCIS. You cannot be outside the US.
Yeah. And if they believe that you weren't here when it was physically mailed, according to their records, you will have a problem, unfortunately. And they will just reject it basically, and that's not good.
Or even worse, it doesn't get rejected and it gets approved and you go on OPT and then you do the STEM extension, then you apply for the H-1B or permanent residency. And then they go back and they look at your travel history and your I-94 and they're like, he wasn't in the US. He's been unauthorized in the US since OPT, or she. And now you've overstayed your visa, all kinds of problems that could have long lasting immigration
Yeah.
problems for you.
That's why we're so cautious when we're advising people in gray areas about volunteering for anything in America, that maybe the employer says you don't need to have work authorization and you decide to do it anyway. Well, the immigration services at some later point, when they're reviewing your green card application, your H-1B, they'll do a deep dive into everything you've done, your travel history as well. And if they feel you did something without authorization, they may feel that from that moment going forward, you didn't have a status. And anything you did from then on was just improper. It's no different to someone who re-enters temporarily as a tourist during vacation quarter, then leaves and then re-enters again on their F1 status. Just because the port of entry at the second re-entry didn't catch it, it doesn't mean that you've corrected the problem, unfortunately. So next question. If I apply for post-OPT exactly 60 days after the reconferral date and the processing time is more than 90 days, would I lose my legal status during that processing time?
If you apply for post OPT exactly 60 days after the degree conferral. So I don't know why you would be doing that. They have to get your application before the 60-day grace period ends. So you can't be mailing it, submitting it exactly 60 days after degree conferral date. I have no idea why you want to do that.
I think I know what. So if for people who are graduating but not applying for OPT, then you do have a 6-day grace period. You must leave the United States within that 6-day time frame. However, if you have a receipt notice issued for post-OPT from the USCIS, and it shows that you have a timely filed application for post-OPT, then the 6-day grace period no longer applies to you. So if you're graduating in June and you mail it in early June, and it doesn't get approved until September, October, perhaps, that's just the way it is. You haven't forfeited your status in mid-August because you had in mid-August proof that you filed your application, and you're merely waiting in the United States for the USCIS to approve your application. And in the case of an application which took longer than expected or was late filed, also in a timely fashion as well, the dates that you requested may not be the dates they finally approve. They may change your start date to a later date, but they may not necessarily change your end date as well. So you may end up being approved for less than 12 months of OPT.
I don't. Yeah, you can. So basically, you can be in the U.S. on a pending OPT application. We don't advise that you depart the U.S. while your OPT application is pending. But I really don't understand the first part of that question. I don't know if you want to write back in or come to group advising tomorrow and run your plan by the advisor of that session.
All right, cool. Can I set my new job start date any day between the 24th of September, no like earlier, hey, and 3 months post the 24th?
I set my new job start date any date between the 24th of September and 3 months post. No. So the start date has to be within the 60-day grace period following degree conferral. So the earliest start date is September 24th, and then your degree conferral is on September 23rd. So October 23rd would be 1 month, and then November 22nd would be the end of the 60-day grace period. So your start date has to be within September 24th and November 22nd.
And you don't need a job in order to apply for OPT, because most people don't know a few months ahead. If you're lucky, you do know, but most people don't. So you apply in good faith based on you'd like to be able to start working on one date after your graduation date, and then maybe you're applying for 12 months from that date going forward. Hopefully they'll give you what you want in a timely fashion. And then only from the start date on the EAD card will you be able to start working, or will you be assessed to be unemployed once the EAD card begins. And during the lifetime of your post-OPT, you have 90 days of unemployment time. And for those folks who eventually plan to apply for STEM extension, you do not get the credit for those extended unemployment days until you actually are on your STEM extension. So for the initial phase of post-OPT, you have 90 days of unemployment time. So, all right, I believe that's done. I already submitted the post-OPT application to Bechtel with the recommended end date 1 year from the start date, not 1 year minus a day, as mentioned in the webinar.
That's okay. That's okay. Actually, when we enter your start date, CVIS will populate the end date. So they'll put that information automatically in.
Yeah. What should the start and end date on the cover letter be? Should they follow the dates on the existing job offer letter?
No, those dates on your cover letter should match your requested start date and end date of employment that you submit in Bechtel Connect. And that shows up on your OPT endorsed I-20.
Yeah, they should be exactly the same dates.
It's not based on your job offer letter.
Yeah. I currently have a green card application with the USCIS. Will the post-OPT application affect that? If my green card is granted before the post-OPT, can I work on that?
So our scope of practice are the F and J student visas. I don't know how applying for OPT might affect your green card application. That's a question you'd want to direct to an immigration attorney. What I can tell you is that you can only be in the US in one immigration status at a time. So you can certainly apply for post-OPT if all you've done is apply for the green card app and not used the work authorization from the green card application or the advanced parole to enter the US based on your green card application. So if you haven't done any of that and you're still in the US in F1 status, you can apply for post-OPT. If my green card is granted before, so yeah, so if your green card application, if you get the work authorization based on the green card application and that's what you use for your employment instead of OPT, then you need to let us know within 10 days because we have to close out your CVIS record and let the US government know that you've changed, that you're no longer in F1 status. Because again, you can't be in the US under more than one status.
And it's extremely common. Another issue to talk with your future immigration attorney is to talk about travel and reentry, how that might complicate the green card application because an F1 status is a non-immigrant intent, whereas a green card is you're applying for permanent residency, and so you definitely want to talk to an immigration attorney about how one might affect the other and how it might be perceived by the Department of State or the USCIS as well. Okay. Do you have a list of immigration lawyers you could recommend?
So we can't recommend lawyers, but we do have a list of immigration attorneys that have spoken at Bechtel. And if you email internationalstudents@stanford.edu, we can send you that list.
Is it okay to work part-time jobs with full-time OPT?
OPT full-time, USCIS considers full-time under OPT to be 20 hours or more per week. So if the job is 20 or more hours per week, you would be reporting that in the portal as full-time employment. Every employment that you have has to be related to your field of study and has to be reported in the SCVP portal. If that employment is 19 hours or less, then you would be reporting that employment as part-time. But again, that part-time employment has to be related to your field of study. Has to be reported in the SCVP portal.
Also, you can volunteer as well in your field of study. And if that's more than 20 hours a week, then you're maintaining your status and you're not assessed to be unemployed. It's just that you have to share the information through the CBIS portal with like the US government. And I guess in terms of transparency, any job you have while you're an OPT should be reflected in the CBIS portal. So even a temporary job for just a few days, that's fine as well. Also, a lot of students find great benefit from talking to their professors and talking to Beam as well about finding work after graduation, perhaps even working with Stanford after graduation in some lab, maybe in a voluntary manner as well. That's perfectly fine. Okay. So for coterms only, conferring the bachelor's and applying for OPT at the bachelor's level, we're still eligible for master's OPT, right? And when is the right time to apply for a leave of absence from the actual master's?
So it sounds like this is one of those situations where student is a coterm, but they're not conferring their master's degree. They're going to return to Stanford to complete their master's degree after doing a year of OPT. So if that's the case, I can't answer the LOA question. You'll want to talk to your department or student services to find out when the best time is to apply for LOA. You want to make sure that when you get the OPT endorsed I-20 from us, that the degree level is the bachelor's degree level. And then OPT, so you can get OPT once per degree level. So as long as you, and I don't think you can have, but as long as you didn't do OPT at the master's degree level before, you'll be eligible for the master's degree by coming back to Stanford and finishing that up. Unless there's a break in your CBIS record. So for example, if you decide to end your OPT early and you leave the US without requesting your I-20 be changed to the master's degree level so you can come back, now you need an initial I-20 to return to the US. That resets the eligibility requirement for OPT. So as long as you continue from OPT back into Stanford under the same CBIS record, you'll be eligible for OPT under the master's degree level.
Or transfer to a new institution as well to continue their master's as well. So some students do that.
Yeah.
Another issue is, a question is, for people who are graduating and post-OPT, can they continue on in some part-time fashion, any courses at Stanford or at another university, which will mean award of another degree eventually?
Yeah, so you can do incidental study while under OPT, but if you're going to be pursuing another degree while under OPT, you have to end your OPT and then update your I-20 to change a degree level or something else that you're now back in school studying to get a degree. Otherwise, you can engage in classes that don't lead to a degree.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 months of pre-OPT from another degree level, but don't have my EAD card or any photocopy of it anymore. I should have the corresponding pre-OPT though. Is like that fine, and what should I do?
Yeah, so in that case, make copies of the pre-OPT, indicate on part 6 the pre-OPT, and in your cover letter, you'll just say, I did pre-OPT on these days, under this degree level, under the CBIS ID number. I no longer have a copy of that EAD card, and just leave it at that. It's unlikely that this will cause you an issue, but you just want to note it in your cover letter that you don't have that EAD card anymore.
And you would highlight that section of the overall, you wouldn't highlight everything on the cover letter, but that is something of importance to the USCIS, because in the past they've granted you something, and for their benefit, you might want to tell them up front what the status is of what you've been approved for in the past from the best of your memory.
Yeah, I wouldn't advise going as far as highlighting, just because it was another degree level and not this current one, so it shouldn't have any impact on your current OPT application because you're on a different degree level. So I don't know that you need to highlight it, because the rule of thumb in my thinking is the less they have to think about your application, the better off you are. So it's not something you need to draw attention to. Now, if it was pre-OPT under this degree level, yeah, I would say highlight that in your cover letter, but just provide the information in your cover letter and you should be okay.
Okay. After I send my application, can I go for vacations abroad if I can make it back into the US before the 23rd?
So Sean already answered that question. And I would say go back and rewatch this when it comes up on our website for the answer to that question.
Also, is it okay to use a PO box as the address to the USCS to send the EAD card to?
It is okay. Just make sure that that PO box is going to be valid for the next 6 months. I know the university uses PO boxes, and there seems to be an issue every quarter for students about how long that PO box will be theirs. So just make sure that that PO box will be valid for the next 6 months.
Mhm. After my OPT is approved, if I quit my job, then do I need to leave the US or can I stay and look for a new job?
So you get 90 days of unemployment to use. Those 90 days become effective on the start date of employment on the EAD card. So as long as you have not used up those 90 days of unemployment, you can stay and keep looking for work in the US.
Yeah. So if you manage to have a job on the first day and then a month later you quit, and then it's 30 days until the next time you start working again in a full-time manner, then you would have accrued 30 days. So you would have 60 days left as a balance of unused time. So you're constantly, while you have unemployment time left, then you have flexibility in case of last minute job loss or something else, or you end up working for someone and you don't like to work for them anymore. By having the unused unemployment time, which you haven't used so far, then you have flexibility to say, I'm not coming in tomorrow, I'm quitting instead. So,
Isn't that the American dream?
yes. Also, sometimes you may think that you're going to be working for someone and you may be unemployed until that date. But if you accrue too much unemployment time holding out for that one job to begin, but then maybe through downsizing or they get bought out as a startup, they may have to rescind that job offer letter and you may be stuck without any job to maintain your status on. And that's why it's good to maybe think about volunteering, maybe with a professor, receive some documentary evidence, report that to CEVIS portal, and therefore you're not assessed to be unemployed. For people who graduate in September who have no ambition to work until maybe December, and their OPT begins in maybe November, well, it's a way of strategizing how best to maximize your status. So I fill out the OPT I-20 request on Bechtel Connect with an end date based on an existing offer. Can I please change that to be the maximum time period of a year minus 1 day? Is it possible if we end up returning to school earlier than the OPT end date?
So you should email us with your student ID number and say you want to change the OPT end date. And then when you get the OPT endorsed I-20, verify that it is for the full 12 months.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee if you try to split your OPT like that, that you'll actually be approved again for OPT. So there's no reason to be splitting it. You should just request the OPT for the full year. So again, email us with your student ID number and say you want to change your end date so that's the full year of OPT. And the second part of your question, is it okay if we end up returning to school? Or, yes, that's fine. You'll let us know at least 2 weeks before the start of the quarter that you're coming back, and then we will change the degree level on your OPT if that's the reason why, or we'll end your OPT so that way you can come back.
Mario, do you want to talk briefly about if we've already issued the I-20 for OPT and the student has mailed in their application and then they'd like to change the dates on the request prior to approval by the USCIS? Do you want to talk about that scenario?
Yeah, so we're going to cover it in part 2, but just briefly, the employment start dates that you request, once you've mailed off that application to USCIS, cannot be changed. So you can change them before you mail your application to USCIS through Bechtel. Once you've mailed your application to USCIS, the employment dates that you requested cannot be changed.
And can I apply to graduate just like summer quarter now? So to proceed with the OPT application before I've submitted my final requirements, the PhD thesis, for which the deadline is around August.
Yeah, so this only applies to PhD students, but if you're a PhD student and you think that you might be graduating this quarter, you can apply for OPT. And then if for some reason you're not able to graduate, you will, you can finish your PhD degree while on OPT. It's just that you wouldn't be eligible for any employment-based funding by the university, like through assistantships, after September 23rd. So for PhDs, it used to be called thesis pending OPT, but they rolled that into post OPT. And that's the answer to your question. So yes, you can apply now for OPT, and if for some reason you don't graduate, you can finish your degree under OPT.
So we have no more questions.
All right, so hopefully I'll see you again. When's
It's
when-
June 28th at 4 p.m., which is a
Yes.
Wednesday.
So it's a few days after when you can mail in your application to USCIS. I would have done it sooner, but had some scheduling conflicts. But it won't matter that much in terms of how quickly your OPT application gets processed. You'll just bring your completed application with you and we'll just go through the whole thing. Or you don't have to wait and use our final review checklist. We've been using that for over a year now and it works really well. So you don't have to wait, you can mail it off on, what did we say, the 25th?
Yeah, it's Monday, June 28th.
Yeah.
at
Oh,
4
I'm sorry,
p.m.
the
California.
earliest date you can mail your application is June 25th. So if you don't want to wait for part 2 on the 28th, you can use the final review checklist and mail off your application with confidence on June 25th. Otherwise, if you want somebody to go over your application, we can do that together as a group on June 28th, and I can answer any last questions you might have about your OPT application.
Yeah, and also we do have group advising. If you're unable to schedule, we won't go through the whole application, but if you have specific questions, we'll definitely answer that either in unscheduled group advising, Thursday and Friday of this week, Tuesday and Friday of next week, it's changing. Or if you want to make a private appointment for 10 minutes time to talk to an advisor, maybe they can answer all your questions during that time frame.
Yeah, and specific questions. We don't, in individual advising, we don't do application reviews anymore.
Yeah.
Again, because of all the resources we have on our website.
I guess one thing we didn't mention is regarding double or single-sided printing, we recommend consistency. Most people traditionally mail in single-sided photocopies. It makes it easier for the USCIS to process them because they won't actually assume that there's 1 or 2 pages which are double-sided and the majority are single-sided. They don't really care about sacrificing the trees. They don't really like trees, I think, in the USCIS officially. So this is one of those times where you have to send in a media application, single-sided printing only. And black and white's perfectly fine, just long as it's legible. That's all they care about.
All right. So good luck, and maybe I'll see you on June 28th.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.
I'll end the recording now. It was great to talk to everyone, or well, by text, I suppose. So.